My sister destroyed my relationship 3 weeks before my wedding. You just don't understand what it's like to lose your soulmate, she cried after sleeping with my fiancé. I contacted her one true love and made her watch him fall for me instead. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. It's about my family, about a betrayal that nearly broke me, and about a revenge that, unexpectedly, ended up saving my life. Now, my younger sister, Brenda, she's been using the same tired excuse since she turned 21. The world owes her something, you see. Because she can't have her one true love, she feels she has the right to burn down everyone else's happiness. And I don't mean that in a cute, bless her heart, she's still hung up on her ex kind of way. I mean it in a cold, calculated way. If you have a spark of joy in your life, she will find a way to snuff it out, and then she'll stand in the ashes and cry about her own tragic love story. Her one true love, his name was Walter. She met him at some loud, sweaty college party 4 years ago. They hooked up. Once. He never called her again. For any normal person, that's a Tuesday. For Brenda, it became the defining tragedy of her existence, her origin story for being a truly awful human being. It started small, the way a cancer does. Her first real victim was her best friend since kindergarten, Judith. They were inseparable, the kind of friends who had their own language. One weekend, Brenda stayed over at Judith's apartment. By Monday morning, Judith's boyfriend of 3 years, a sweet guy named Mark, was sending Brenda good morning texts filled with heart emojis. Judith came home early from her shift at the hospital and found them in her own bed. The bed she and Mark had picked out together. I was the one Judith called, her voice choked with a kind of ragged, breathless sobbing I'd never heard before. I don't understand, Melissa, she cried into the phone. I asked her how she could do it. To me. What did she say? I asked, my stomach twisting into a cold, hard knot. She looked at me, Judith whispered, with tears in her eyes, and she said, you just don't understand what it's like to lose your soulmate. My sister. She said that to me after sleeping with my boyfriend. Judith never spoke to her again, and Brenda just shrugged it off, as if losing a lifelong friend was a small price to pay for her grand drama. Then, a year later, came our cousin Shirley's engagement party. Brenda, of course, had to be the star. She showed up in a slinky, backless dress that cost more than my month's rent, a splash of red in a room of happy pastels. She got completely drunk on the free champagne and cornered the poor groom, Michael, in the hallway leading to the bathrooms. Michael told me about it later, his face still pale. He said she'd put her hand on his chest, looked up at him with those big, sad eyes, and whispered, you remind me of someone special. Someone I lost. Thank God Michael was a decent man. He gently removed her hand, told her she was drunk, and went straight to Shirley to tell her what happened. But Brenda? She twisted the entire story. She ran to her parents, weaving a pathetic tale about how seeing the happy couple had triggered her deep-seated trauma over losing Walter. And my mother, my sweet, enabling mother, bought every word. I found Mom in the kitchen later that night, her face etched with worry. Your sister is just so fragile, she said, wringing her hands. All this talk of weddings, it's too much for her sensitive heart. Mom, she harassed the groom, I said, trying to keep my voice even. She's hurting, Melissa, she insisted. We need to be gentle with her. The next day, Mom booked Brenda a $500 spa weekend to help her heal. I watched Brenda pack her designer bags, a smug little smile on her face, and that's when the dread truly set in. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my turn was coming. By the time I met Dennis, I knew the drill. He was everything Brenda wasn't, kind, steady, logical. He worked in finance, a world of spreadsheets and clear-cut answers, and he had a calm, reassuring presence that felt like coming home. Our relationship was my fortress, and for 2 years, I guarded it with my life. He never came to Sunday dinners. I always had an excuse, a work deadline, a friend in need. I quietly unfollowed Brenda on all my social media and politely asked my friends not to tag us in photos together. I felt a constant, low-level guilt about the lies. I remember one summer afternoon, my parents were having a big backyard barbecue. I wanted Dennis to be there, to see him laughing with my dad and charming my aunts. But I couldn't risk it. I have to go to my parents for a few hours, I told him, trying to sound casual. Mom needs help setting everything up. He was on the couch, reading a book. He looked up and smiled. Want me to come? I make a mean potato salad. No, it's fine, I said, maybe a little too quickly. It's just a family thing. Kind of boring. You'd hate it. I saw a flicker of hurt in his eyes, and it felt like a small betrayal. But it felt necessary. I was protecting him. I was protecting us. I told him my sister was going through something and needed a lot of space. It was a vague but effective shield. And for 2 years, it worked. Our life was peaceful, our own little world. We spent a whole weekend once just assembling a complicated bookshelf from IKEA, laughing and getting frustrated and ordering pizza when we gave up. It was one of my favorite memories. It was real. It was ours. We got engaged last spring. It was simple, perfect. He put on our favorite song and got down on one knee right in our living room. No audience, no spectacle. Just a quiet promise between two people. We planned a small ceremony, a simple affair at a vineyard with just a handful of our closest friends. No big family drama. No Brenda. But I made one mistake. One single, catastrophic mistake. In a moment of weakness, of pure, unguarded joy, I announced our engagement at my mom's 60th birthday dinner. The whole table erupted in congratulations. My dad hugged me, my aunts cooed. But I was watching Brenda. For a moment, she was silent, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Then, her eyes lit up with a predatory gleam, like a wolf spotting a lamb. She rushed over and hugged me, a hug that felt too tight, too possessive. I'm so happy for you, she whispered in my ear, her voice dripping with a sweetness that made my skin crawl. When do I get to meet him? That question was a declaration of war. And I, the foolish guard, had just handed her the keys to the gate. A week later, the first cannonball hit the fortress wall. Dennis showed me his phone, a puzzled laugh on his face. Your sister is persistent, I'll give her that, he said. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling through Instagram, and he tilted the screen towards me. There it was, a friend request and a series of messages from a fake account, a generic name with no profile picture. But the saccharine, slightly too eager tone was unmistakably Brenda. Hi Dennis. I'm Melissa's sister, Brenda. So excited to finally meet you. She talks about you all the time. Followed by, you seem like such a great guy from your pictures. She's so lucky. And then, the one that made my stomach clench into a tight, cold knot, I hope I get to know you better before the wedding. It's so important that family is close, don't you think? She's really laying it on thick, I said, forcing a laugh. I tried to sound amused, unbothered. Inside, a siren was blaring. It's kind of sad, really, Dennis said, completely oblivious to the cold dread spreading through my chest. He was a good man. He couldn't comprehend this kind of calculated malice. To him, this was just a slightly overbearing little sister. So, what's her deal, anyway? He asked, putting his phone down. You're always so vague about her. You said she's had a tough time with relationships? I hesitated, the truth catching in my throat. Yeah, I said, looking away. She had this one boyfriend in college, Walter. She thought he was the one. It ended badly and she just never really got over it. She gets a little intense around happy couples. It was a watered-down, pathetic version of the truth. I was still protecting him, still trying to keep the full extent of her toxicity away from our life. "Poor kid," he said, shaking his head with sympathy. Sympathy. For Brenda. "Don't worry," he said, pulling me into a hug and kissing my forehead. "It's sweet that she's trying to connect. I'll just ignore it and then block her. No big deal." He squeezed my hand, and for a moment, I let myself believe him. I let myself believe that a simple block button could stop the force of nature that was my sister's envy. It was a fatal miscalculation. That was just the first probe, the first test of our defenses. The real assault was yet to come, and I, in my comfortable bubble of love and false security, was completely unprepared for the devastation she was about to unleash. 3 weeks before my wedding, the flu hit me like a freight train. It wasn't just a sniffle, it was the full-blown, can't get out of bed, every bone in my body aches kind of misery. The world was a hazy blur of fever dreams and the stale taste of lukewarm water. Dennis was supposed to be at his brother's annual golf tournament, an all-day event an hour out of town. He'd left early that morning, his hand cool on my feverish forehead. "Get some rest," he'd whispered. "I'll bring you back some of that amazing chicken soup from the deli." I spent the day drifting in and out of a sweaty, miserable sleep. The house was unnaturally quiet, the silence amplifying the pounding in my head. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone, which I'd left on the nightstand, buzzed weakly. I fumbled for it, my arm feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. It was a text from my friend Sarah. "Hey! Didn't know Dennis was skipping the golf thing today. Just saw his Tesla parked in the visitor spot at Brenda's apartment complex on my way to the grocery store. Tell him I said hi." I read the text once. Then twice. The words swam in front of my eyes, refusing to make sense. Brenda's apartment? No. It was a mistake. A white Tesla, they all looked the same. A coincidence. But a deep, icy dread washed over me, so powerful it cut right through the fever haze. My heart started a frantic, panicked rhythm against my ribs. I called him. Straight to voicemail. "Hey, you've reached Dennis. Leave a message." The cheerful, familiar recording felt like a slap in the face. I tried again. Voicemail. I threw back the covers, my body screaming in protest. Every muscle ached, but I didn't care. I pulled on the sweatpants and hoodie that were crumpled on the floor, my hands shaking. I didn't even look in the mirror. I grabbed my car keys and stumbled out the door. The drive over was a 10-minute nightmare. I was running every possible scenario through my head, a frantic attempt to find a logical explanation. Maybe his brother's tournament got cancelled. Maybe Brenda called with a family emergency. Maybe he's picking up a surprise for me. Each excuse felt thinner and more pathetic than the last. I was fighting a war against my own intuition, and I was losing. I pulled into her complex and there it was. His car. Unmistakable. Parked neatly in a visitor spot, gleaming in the afternoon sun. I felt a wave of dizziness so intense I had to grip the steering wheel to steady myself. This is it, I thought. This is the emergency. I fumbled in my purse for the spare key Brenda had given me years ago. For emergencies only, she'd said with a dramatic flair. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely fit the key in the lock. The door swung open silently into the quiet apartment. I could hear soft music playing from the living room. I crept down the short hallway, my socked feet making no sound on the hardwood floor. And then I saw them. They were on her couch. Her head was in his lap. His hand was tangled in her hair, stroking it gently, rhythmically. They were both half-dressed, his shirt unbuttoned, her tank top hanging off one shoulder. A half-empty bottle of wine sat on the coffee table. They weren't talking. They weren't kissing. They were just still. existing in a bubble of quiet, sickening intimacy that was supposed to be mine. Brenda looked up as I stepped into the room. She didn't look surprised or guilty. She looked triumphant. Her wide, innocent eyes were already welling up with perfectly formed, fake tears. It was a performance, and I had just walked in for the final scene. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice a perfect imitation of heartbreak. He just reminds me so much of Walter." Dennis didn't move. He didn't speak. His hand was still in her hair. He just looked at me, his face a blank mask. No shock. No guilt. Just nothing. That nothingness was worse than any angry denial. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A strange, cold calm washed over me. I looked at the two of them, a perfect little tableau of betrayal, and I turned around and walked out. He didn't call my name. He didn't scramble to his feet. He didn't even try to stop me. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time, the engine off, the world silent except for the frantic pounding in my ears. The fever was gone, burned away by a white-hot rage that consumed everything. In that moment, sitting in the shadow of my sister's apartment, I made a decision. Brenda wanted a tragedy? I would give her one. She would finally learn what it really feels like to lose something you love. I drove home on autopilot, the familiar streets of my neighborhood feeling alien and strange. I walked into the apartment that Dennis and I had shared, the home we had built, and everything looked wrong. The photos of us on the mantelpiece, the stupid little inside jokes taped to the fridge, the way his shoes were kicked off by the door, it was all evidence of a life that no longer existed. I collapsed onto our couch, the one where we had planned our future, and for the first time, I let myself break. It wasn't a quiet cry. It was a raw, guttural sob that tore through me, a physical agony that came from a place deeper than just a broken heart. It was the complete and utter shattering of trust. It was the betrayal by the two people in the world who were supposed to have my back. After the tears finally ran out, I was left with a chilling, crystalline clarity. Crying wouldn't fix this. Being the victim wouldn't fix this. I had spent years walking on eggshells around Brenda, managing her emotions, protecting my own life from her toxic fallout. No more. And that's when I thought of him. Walter. The ghost at Brenda's feast. The excuse for all her sins. He wasn't some mythic figure who had vanished into thin air. He was a real person. And thanks to the strange interconnectedness of the world, we'd been following each other on Instagram for the past 3 years. We had a few mutual friends from college. We'd thrown the occasional like on each other's posts. We had never spoken. Driven by a surge of reckless energy, I grabbed my phone and pulled up his profile. It was just as I remembered, professional photos from his physical therapy clinic, weekend shots of him hiking with a goofy golden retriever, a life that looked solid, normal, and completely separate from the chaos Brenda manufactured. He lived 3 hours away. Perfect. I stared at the message button, my thumb hovering over the screen. This was insane. This was the kind of impulsive, crazy thing people did in movies, not in real life. He would think I was a lunatic. He would block me. But then I pictured Brenda's triumphant, tear-filled eyes, and I didn't care. My fingers flew across the screen before I could second-guess myself. "Hey, this is weird, but my sister, Brenda, had a thing for you in college, and she just ruined my wedding. Want to help me ruin her life?" I hit send. The message sat there, a little blue bubble of desperation. Scene. My heart hammered against my ribs. What had I just done? I paced my living room, the adrenaline making me feel jittery and sick. 5 minutes passed. 10. This was a mistake. I was about to throw my phone across the room when it buzzed. 3 little dots appeared. He was typing. The message that popped up on my screen was simple. Brenda? The girl who showed up at my mom's house? My breath caught in my throat. It was worse than I thought. I typed back a single word, yes. His reply came instantly. I'm in. My phone rang less than a minute later. It was him. I answered, my hand trembling slightly. Hello? Melissa? It's Walter. His voice was calm and steady, with a dry, amused edge that immediately put me at ease. So, your sister is still being your sister, I see. And for the next hour, he told me everything. It turned out Brenda's obsession hadn't just been talk. A couple of years ago, she had driven the 3 hours to his hometown, looked up his parents' address, and shown up on their doorstep on a Sunday afternoon. She had introduced herself to his mother as a dear old friend from college, a long-lost love. She had spun a twisted, tragic tale about how Walter was the love of her life, how cruel circumstances had torn them apart, and how she just wanted to connect with the mother of the man she was destined to be with. My mom is a sweetheart, Walter said, his voice tight with frustration. She lives in a small town. She believes in the good in people. She invited Brenda in for tea. Brenda, of course, had documented the entire visit, posting selfies with his mother on her social media. Reuniting with my dear future mother-in-law, she captioned one of them. Walter had to spend a week calming his mother down, assuring her that she hadn't been part of some elaborate scam, and explaining that Brenda was, for lack of a better word, unhinged. He mentioned that his mom had been so shaken by Brenda's intensity that she'd even considered calling a lawyer to ask about a restraining order. That's when I knew she was dangerous, he said. She doesn't love, she possesses. What she can't have, she destroys. Tell me about it, I said, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. She just destroyed my 2-year relationship and my wedding. So what's the plan? He asked, his voice shifting from frustrated to conspiratorial. How do we ruin her life? We spent the next 2 weeks planning every single step over the phone. It was strange, plotting with a man I'd never actually met, but it felt right. We had a common enemy, and it created an instant bond. We mapped out our strategy like generals planning a campaign. The target, my father's 65th birthday lunch. It was the one family event no one ever missed, a command performance. The mission, to show up together, looking like the happiest, most in-love couple on the planet. She has to see you choosing me, I said. Freely. Happily. It's the one thing she can't stand. Consider it done, Walter said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. The game was on. On Friday, I drove to the bus station to pick him up. I was a nervous wreck, my stomach churning. What if this was a mistake? What if he was weird in person? What if we had no chemistry and the whole thing would be painfully awkward? Then he stepped off the bus, and all my anxieties vanished. He was even more handsome in person, tall, with kind eyes and a charismatic, easy smile that made you feel like you'd known him for years. He radiated a quiet confidence that was the complete opposite of Brenda's needy desperation. He was the kind of man she could never manipulate, and he knew it. He tossed his bag in the back of my car and slid into the passenger seat. The co-conspirator has arrived, he announced with a grin. The awkwardness I'd feared never materialized. The 2-hour drive to my town flew by as we went over the plan, rehearsing our lines like actors before a big premiere. Okay, so when my Aunt Carol, the nosy one, asks how we met, what's the story? I quizzed him. Easy, he said, not missing a beat. Mutual friends set us up on a blind date. You thought I was arrogant, I thought you were uptight. We hated each other. But the chemistry was just too strong to deny. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. That's ridiculously dramatic. It's perfect. By the time we pulled up to my house, it felt less like we were co-conspirators and more like old friends embarking on a grand adventure. On Saturday, at 1 o'clock sharp, we parked in front of my parents' house. The familiar scent of my dad's barbecue smoke hung in the air. I took a deep breath, smoothing down the front of the new dress I'd bought for the occasion, a bold, confident red. I slipped on my high heels, put a bright, unwavering smile on my face, and turned to him. Ready for your debut? He took my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. Let's give her a show she'll never forget. We walked in, and his hand felt so natural in mine, as if we'd been holding it for years. The living room was buzzing with the usual family chatter. And there, in the center of it all, was Brenda. She was holding court, telling some exaggerated story to my uncles, laughing loudly. Then she saw us. Her laughter died in her throat. It wasn't a gradual fade, it was a sudden, choked silence, as if someone had hit the mute button. Her eyes widened, first in confusion, and then, as they landed on our joined hands, in pure, unadulterated shock. The entire room seemed to fall silent for a beat, the energy shifting as everyone turned to look at the newcomers. I kept my smile firmly in place, a mask of serene happiness. Everyone, I announced, my voice bright and clear, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. I want you to meet someone. This is Walter. The name hung in the air for a moment, an unexploded bomb. Brenda's face went through a rapid-fire series of emotions, chalky white, then a blotchy, angry red. She forced her lips into a strained, unnatural smile. Walter, she said, her voice a squeak. She tried for an awkward laugh that sounded like breaking glass. Wow. What a coincidence. Walter smiled back, a cool, polite smile that gave nothing away. He was a natural. Hi, Brenda. It's good to see you again. That single, casual sentence, good to see you again, was a masterstroke. It confirmed he remembered her, but stripped the memory of any significance. It destroyed any shred of control she was pretending to have. She stammered something incoherent, something about college, but I was already moving, guiding Walter further into the room, introducing him to my aunts and uncles. He was charming, shaking hands, remembering names, asking all the right questions. I sat down on the sofa with him right beside me, our sides touching. I immediately took out my phone, angled it for a selfie of the two of us, smiling brightly. For the memories, I said loudly enough for Brenda to hear, and posted it directly to my Instagram story. My every move was a calculated blade to her vanity. During lunch, she tried desperately to regain control. She sat directly across from us, trying to interject herself into our conversation, trying to reminisce about some fabricated memory from that one college party. Remember that band that played, Walter? They were awful, right? Walter didn't even look at her. He turned to me, his eyes warm. You know, love, you never told me you were such a good artist. Your mom was just showing me your old paintings. He put his arm around my shoulders, and every time he did that, every time he used a pet name, I saw Brenda press her lips together in a thin, white line. She was crumbling, right on schedule. After my dad blew out the candles on his cake, she finally couldn't take it anymore. She muttered something about a headache, pushed her chair back abruptly, and practically fled from the table. She locked herself in the upstairs bathroom. I gave it exactly 1 minute, then I excused myself and followed her. I knocked on the door, a sharp, deliberate rap. Silence. I knocked again, harder. Brenda? It's me. Open the door. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open. She stood there, her perfect makeup a smeared, tear-streaked mess. Her eyes were red and pleading, the picture of a victim. What do you want now? She asked, her voice a raw, broken whisper. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms, and gave her a look of pure, fake concern. I just came to see if you're okay, I replied, my voice dripping with false sympathy. After all, it must be so hard to see your one true soulmate in your sister's arms. That must really trigger your trauma. Her face hardened. You're doing this just to hurt me, she spat, her voice trembling with rage. And you slept with my fiancé 3 weeks before my wedding just because you couldn't stand to see me happy, I shot back, my voice low and steady. You blew up my life for a cheap thrill. So, no, Brenda. This here? This isn't me hurting you. This is justice. He was mine, she screamed, her control finally shattering completely. She slammed her fist against the drywall, a dull thud echoing in the small, tiled room. I saw him first. I felt it first. I stepped into the bathroom, closing the door behind me. No, Brenda, I said, my voice dropping to an icy whisper that cut through her hysterics. You saw him once. You had a forgettable one-night stand, and he never thought about you again. You invented a love story in your head, a pathetic fantasy that you used as an excuse to be a cruel, selfish person to everyone who ever cared about you. But now? Now the show is over. You are going to sit downstairs at that table, and you are going to watch him love me. Because unlike you, I didn't have to lie. I didn't have to manipulate. I didn't have to beg. She just collapsed. She slid down the wall and crumpled onto the bath mat, sobbing loudly, hysterically, like a child. Just then, my mom knocked on the door, her voice laced with concern. Girls? Is everything okay in there? I opened the door, stepped over my sister's sobbing form without a second glance, and looked my mother in the eye. Everything's fine, Mom, I said calmly. Brenda's just feeling a little overwhelmed. I walked out with my head held high, leaving her to deal with the mess. I went back to the living room and sat down next to Walter. He put his arm around me, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "She's going to lose it even more. Are you ready?" I looked at him, and a real, genuine smile spread across my face. I've never been more ready. I walked out of that bathroom, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The fight was just beginning, but I knew I'd won the first decisive battle. If you're still listening to this, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below. That way, I'll know you gave me a like, and I'll understand that you're right here with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement for me to keep going. Please, comment the number 1 and listen to the rest of my story. Because, my revenge wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The fallout from the party was immediate. My phone buzzed early the next morning. It was Mom. Her voice was laced with that familiar, weary tone she always used when she was about to defend Brenda's latest transgression. She told me Brenda had spent the entire night crying, that she was fragile, that I should have known better than to provoke her. Provoking her? I asked, a humorless laugh escaping my lips. Mom, I brought my boyfriend to a family party. In what world is that a provocation? Or is it just that Brenda has a monopoly on bringing partners to family events, especially when they belong to other people? She sighed heavily, a sound of pure maternal martyrdom. Honey, you know your sister has a sensitive heart. She gets attached so easily. Sensitive? I interrupted, my patience snapping like a dry twig. Mom, she slept with my fiancé. She systematically destroyed my wedding 3 weeks before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, and you're on the phone with me, worried about her feelings? I was home, alone, sick with a 102-degree fever, and she was lying on her couch with him. You are not going to flip this around and make me the bad guy. There was a tense silence. Look, she finally said, her voice clipped. Let's talk another day when you're less emotional. And she hung up. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Not only was she not going to defend me, she was actively blaming me. The family had always treated Brenda like a delicate, broken ornament, forgetting that broken glass has sharp edges. Only now, those edges were finally turning back on herself. On Monday, Walter was still in town. Phase 2, he asked over breakfast. I nodded. I decided to take him to brunch with my closest friends, the ones who had been my personal support system through years of Brenda's drama. He was, in a word, perfect. He was polite, gentle, charismatic, and played the part of the completely devoted boyfriend to a T. He held my hand under the table, laughed at my stupid jokes, and told a charming story about his golden retriever. My friends were smitten. My friend Judith, the one whose life Brenda had blown up years ago, pulled me aside as we were leaving. "This is the most beautiful karma I have ever seen," she whispered, hugging me tightly. But the real masterstroke came that afternoon. Walter posted a photo of us on his Instagram. It was a simple picture one of my friends had taken at brunch, the two of us laughing, bathed in the golden afternoon light. The caption was simple: "Sometimes love appears when you least expect it." The comments started innocently enough. But then, Brenda showed up. Using her real account, for all the world to see, she commented, "This is disgusting. You know what you mean to me." My phone immediately started buzzing with texts from friends, screenshots of the comment. The audacity was breathtaking. But Walter, my brilliant co-conspirator, handled it with surgical precision. He didn't delete the comment. He didn't ignore it. He liked it. Then he replied. "We hooked up once, Brenda. Once. In 2021. And you followed me down the street the next day when I left the party. That's not a beautiful memory. It's obsession." Boom. It was a nuclear bomb dropped right in the middle of her pity party. In less than an hour, the post became the main topic of conversation in all our social circles. People who had known Brenda for years started commenting. Finally, someone said it. "I always thought the way she talked about him was so strange." Wow. Just wow. Karma is real. She stayed silent on the post after that, but my phone was immediately flooded with a series of voice messages on WhatsApp from a number I didn't recognize. They were a chaotic, unhinged rant of crying, screaming, and begging. "How could you do this to me? You're using him against me. You're destroying my life just for revenge." I listened to them all, a cold sense of satisfaction washing over me. Then I replied with a single, simple text. "No, Brenda. I'm just showing you how to rebuild after being destroyed. A lesson you taught me well." And then, without ceremony, I blocked the number. I knew she wouldn't let it go. And sure enough, on Thursday night, the final, desperate move. Brenda made a new post on Instagram. It was a perfectly staged selfie, a tear-streaked face, swollen eyes, soft, low bedroom lighting. The caption was a masterpiece of manipulation. "It's hard when your own sister steals the man you love, laughs at your pain, and is applauded for it. I know I'm not perfect, but no one deserves this." It got over 1,000 likes. Sympathetic comments poured in. "Stay strong. You'll get through this. Family can be the cruelest." What hurt the most was seeing that a few of my own cousins and family friends had reposted it. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. I didn't call first. Mom answered the door, a surprised, wary look on her face. "Melissa. What are you doing here?" "I came to talk," I said, walking past her into the living room where my dad was reading the paper. Brenda came down the stairs as if on cue, dressed in baggy sweatpants, her hair in a messy bun, that carefully crafted "I'm the victim" expression on her face. "Did something happen?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake innocence. "Yes, something happened," I said, stopping in the center of the room. "Enough of you manipulating this entire family. Enough of you playing the victim." I turned to my parents. "Did you see her post? Do you really think this is fair? Do you have any memory of who destroyed whose engagement just a few weeks ago?" "Honey, this isn't the way to solve things," Mom started, her voice placating. "No," I said, holding up a hand. "Now, you're going to listen." I turned my full attention back to Brenda, who was starting to look scared. "You seduced Dennis. You stabbed me in the back. You whispered a fake apology and thought that would be enough, that you could go right on being the family's tragic princess. But the tables have turned. Now you're the one crying, and no one is going to save you this time. Because a sad little Instagram post isn't going to erase the screenshots, the voice messages, the testimonies of all the people you've hurt. Everyone sees who you really are now. The mask has fallen, Brenda. She just stood there, silent, tears streaming down her face. My dad was staring down at his lap, unable to meet my eyes. I am tired, I said, my voice shaking with years of pent-up frustration. Tired of being the forgotten daughter while you put on your little shows. Enough. The stage is mine now. And the audience? They're on my side. I turned and walked out, not waiting for a single one of them to answer. In the car, Walter was behind the wheel, the radio playing softly, a hot coffee waiting for me in the cup holder. He didn't ask questions. He just waited. So, he finally said as I got in. It was beautiful, I replied, a slow, tired smile spreading across my face. She finally knows she has no control anymore. He smiled back, a real, warm smile. You know, getting revenge on her was more therapeutic than I ever imagined. Yeah, I said, taking a sip of the coffee. It was perfect. And you know what's even better? What? Part 2 is still coming. Part 2 began with an invitation. My friend Harold, a talented chef, was finally opening his own restaurant. The launch party was the hottest ticket in town, guaranteed to be crawling with local media and influencers. It was exactly the kind of event Brenda would kill to be seen at. She curated her entire life to look like she belonged in those circles, a life of borrowed glamour and carefully staged photos. But this time, she wasn't on the list. I was. And so was Walter. We arrived, and the moment we stepped out of the car, we were hit by a barrage of flashing cameras. A photographer from a popular city events blog stopped us. You two make a stunning couple. Can I get a few shots? The next day, our photo was the lead image in their online gallery. The caption, couple of the moment, Melissa and Walter steal the scene at the opening night. Brenda's response was swift and predictable. A vague, passive-aggressive post on her Instagram story, some people need the spotlight to feel alive. I prefer depth. I had to laugh. Depth? This was from a woman whose entire personality was as deep as a puddle, who had thrown herself at my fiancé 3 weeks before my wedding and was now crying on the internet because the guy she barely knew was my boyfriend. The following Saturday was the wedding of our cousin, Shirley. Brenda had always been close to Shirley, and I'm sure she expected Shirley to play peacemaker, to gently ask me not to bring Walter. But Shirley called me a week before. Mel, please come. And you have to bring him, she said, her voice firm. Everyone already knows what happened, and frankly, I don't have the patience to pretend with Brenda anymore. She needs to learn that the world doesn't revolve around her. At the reception, Brenda was alone, stuffed into a dress a size too tight, her makeup a flawless mask, a plastic smile plastered on her face. She studiously avoided looking at us. Walter was the perfect gentleman, his hand always on the small of my back, whispering jokes in my ear that made me laugh. All Brenda could do was watch from across the room, her smile tightening at the edges. But the moment that made the entire night worthwhile came during the first dance. As Shirley and her new husband swayed in the center of the floor, Shirley caught my eye and gave a subtle nod towards the dance floor. Walter took my hand, and we joined them. We were spinning slowly to the music when Brenda approached, her face a mask of desperation. For the first time, she seemed completely disarmed. Walter, can I please talk to you for a second? She asked, her voice trembling. Walter let go of my hand, turned to face her fully, and said with complete, devastating calm, no. I'm busy loving your sister. Brenda froze, her face crumpling. I stepped closer, looked right at her, and added, and for the first time in years, I'm being truly loved. That's something you've never understood, Brenda. You only know how to confuse attention with love. She took 2 shaky steps backward, her eyes welling with tears, and tripped over the hem of her own dress, stumbling awkwardly. No one laughed. It was worse. The people around us just looked away. They ignored her. That collective indifference, that social shunning, hurt her more than any insult could. She scrambled to her feet and fled the reception hall a few minutes later. And me? I kept dancing. For the first time in a very long time, I felt like I had one. A few weeks later, a local podcast host who had seen the buzz around my story reached out. She invited me to be a guest on her show about overcoming adversity. I didn't use names, of course, but I told the whole story. The narcissistic sister. The unfaithful fiancé. The calculated revenge. And the unexpected love that came from the ashes. The episode went viral in our community. My inbox was flooded with messages from women sharing their own stories, thanking me for being brave enough to speak out. Brenda listened. I know she did. That same day, a message from yet another new account appeared in my DMs. Do you really need to expose our family like this just to get applause? I replied without a moment's hesitation. It's not exposure, Brenda. It's liberation. I lived in your one-woman theater for years. Now, the story is mine. And so is the stage. She never replied. In the following weeks, the world she had so carefully constructed began to crumble. I heard through the grapevine that a few small brands she'd been trying to partner with as an influencer had quietly cut contact. People had started openly talking about her obsession with Walter, about her history of destroying relationships. It wasn't me who brought her down. She had sunk her own ship. And me? I just kept living. Walter was no longer just a piece in my revenge plot. The truth is, in the middle of all that chaos, he had become my shelter. A shelter that came disguised as an ally, but who was now a true, steadfast companion. And every day that passed, I saw that what Brenda tried to destroy had only made me stronger. And she, who had always wanted to win through manipulation, now only had silence as her company. The first time I realized I hadn't thought about Dennis in days, maybe even weeks, was on an ordinary Tuesday morning. We were at my apartment. The sun was shining through the window, and Walter was in the kitchen, shirtless, humming an off-key song from the 2000s while he made pancakes. He did this ridiculous little dance move whenever he flipped one, a silly shimmy that always made me laugh. And as I watched him, a feeling of profound peace washed over me. I realized that Dennis was nothing more than a faint, dusty shadow in a forgotten corner of my memory. It wasn't just revenge anymore. Not even close. It was the way Walter held my hand when we were just walking down the street, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. It was how he'd listened to my stories about growing up, about my ridiculous teenage phases, with a sincere smile, even the ones he'd already heard before. It was the way he'd look at me from across the room when I was reading a book on the couch, a look of such quiet contentment, as if he didn't need anything else in the world. None of this was expected. When I sent him that impulsive, desperate message, I thought it would be a temporary alliance, a short-term contract for revenge. I figured he would play a part for a while, until Brenda finally imploded, until I felt avenged, and then our lives would go back to being separate. But they didn't. Walter became my new routine, my present, my security. He met all my friends, who universally adored him. He came to my company's dreadful holiday party and charmed my boss, talking about profit margins and something called a leveraged buyout that made him sound incredibly smart. He started leaving a toothbrush at my place, then a few t-shirts, then his favorite coffee mug. When my ancient car finally died on the side of the highway one rainy Tuesday, he was the first person I called. I was crying, overwhelmed and stressed about the cost of a new car, and he showed up in under an hour with a tow truck and a hot coffee for me. He just handled it. When I had a full-blown anxiety attack before a huge presentation at work for a major promotion, he sat with me on my kitchen floor at 2 a.m. and just stayed silent, holding my hand, until my breathing evened out and the panic subsided. And Dennis? Not even a thought. Not one comparison, nothing. The man who was once the center of my world was now completely irrelevant, because I now had someone who showed up for me, not just for the good times, but for the messy, difficult, ordinary ones. Dennis was made of grand gestures and future promises. Walter was made of present, consistent actions. One night, we went to dinner at a new Italian place that had opened in town. It was nothing fancy, just a cozy atmosphere and good food. When we sat down, Walter took my hand across the checkered tablecloth and said, with that light, easy tone I already knew so well, "You know what's funny? We started all of this to fool your sister, but from the very first day I met you at that bus station, I never pretended anything." I was silent for a few seconds, my heart doing a little flip in my chest. "I'm not pretending anymore either," I replied, an almost embarrassed smile on my face. He laughed and raised his wine glass. "To the best revenge, then?" "No," I corrected, clinking my glass against his. "To what comes after." And for the first time in a very long time, I was at peace. No resentment, no ghosts, no needing anyone else's approval. I was just there, for myself, and so was he. A few days later, walking through downtown, I saw Dennis. He was alone, walking with his head down, his shoulders slumped as if the world was too heavy. It was automatic. I looked away, not out of pain, but simply because it didn't matter anymore. He saw me, and for a second, he hesitated, almost as if he was going to come over and talk. But then he noticed Walter approaching from behind me, smiling as he took my hand and intertwined his fingers with mine. Dennis stopped, his face falling, and then he backed away, disappearing into the crowd. Maybe he finally understood that there was no more space for him. That the place he had so carelessly wasted was now occupied by someone who, without promising anything, had given me everything. That night, lying in bed, I hugged Walter a little tighter and whispered into the quiet of the room, "Thank you for showing up." He looked at me with that calm, steady smile that said everything, even in silence. And I knew. Revenge had brought me justice. But it was what came after that had brought me love. 6 months later, when I truly thought all the storms had passed, I received an unexpected call. It was Dennis. I stared at his name on my screen, a ghost from another life. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I ignored it. On the third ring, Walter was beside me on the couch, reading a book. He looked at my phone, then at me. "Answer it," he said quietly. "You need to close this cycle for good." I took a breath and swiped to answer. "Hello," I said, my voice as neutral and flat as I could make it. "Melissa, it's me." His voice sounded tired, defeated. Can I please talk to you in person?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to hang up. But Walter was right. There was a final chapter that needed to be closed. We arranged to meet at a neutral cafe, a sterile, unfamiliar place far from any of the restaurants or parks that held memories of us. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a small table in the corner. He looked awful. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and there were deep, dark circles under his eyes. He seemed to have aged years in just a few months. "Thank you for coming," he said, not quite looking me in the eye. "What do you want, Dennis?" I asked, getting straight to the point. He sighed deeply, a sound heavy with regret. I wanted to apologize. "Really?" I said, my voice dripping with skepticism. And explain." "Explain what?" "That you were on my sister's couch, your hand in her hair, 3 weeks before our wedding?" "It wasn't like that," he murmured, shaking his head. She came to me when you were sick. She said she needed to talk about something important, about you. She said there were things from your past I needed to know before I married you." A knot of cold fury formed in my stomach. Typical Brenda. "And you believed her?" "She brought proof," he stammered. "Or at least, things that looked like proof. She said you had a history of this. That you had destroyed some girl's life in high school over a boy. She said you were vindictive, manipulative. She showed me old text conversations, things taken completely out of context. He finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. I got confused, Melissa. I was scared. She made it sound like our whole relationship was some kind of game to you, that you were just after the security I could offer, maybe even my family's inheritance down the line. The absurdity of it, the mention of inheritance, was so Brenda. And that's why you slept with her? No, he shook his head desperately. She said she had been in love with me since the day she met me. That she just hadn't said anything because she respected you. That if I called off the wedding, she would be there for me, to help me through it. I was drinking. I was so confused with everything she had told me about you. Dennis, I interrupted, my voice calm and cold as ice. None of that justifies what you did. I know, he whispered, and to my surprise, tears began to form in his eyes. The second you walked out of that apartment, I knew. I looked at her, and I saw the lie. I understood that she had played me, that all of it was a lie. I understood that I had just destroyed the best thing in my life because I was weak and stupid. I remained silent for a long time, letting his words hang in the air. You know what hurts the most, Dennis? It's not even that you cheated. It's that you didn't trust me. We were together for 2 years. You knew me. And yet, you chose to believe the twisted words of a person you barely knew over the woman you were about to marry. He lowered his head in shame. I tried calling you afterward, 1,000 times. I came to your house, but you were never there. And then I saw the photos online with him. And I understood it was too late. It was too late the moment you chose to believe her instead of me, I replied, standing up. It was too late the moment you put your hand in her hair. But thank you for explaining. It helps me be absolutely certain I made the right choice. He looked up at me one last time, his face a picture of utter desolation. Are you happy with him? I smiled, for the first time during the entire conversation, a real, genuine smile. Happier than I ever imagined I could be. And I walked out of that cafe, leaving him and his pathetic excuses behind forever. I didn't feel anger, or sadness, or even pity. I just felt free. The conversation with my family was harder, and it took longer. 3 long months of tense silence passed before my mother finally called, her voice small and hesitant, asking if we could have lunch. Just the 2 of us. To work things out. I met her at a quiet little restaurant downtown. When I saw her, my heart ached. She looked older, smaller, more tired than I had ever seen her. The deep wrinkles around her eyes seemed to have been carved there by stress and regret. How are you, Melissa? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm good, Mom. I'm very good. And Walter? He's good, too. We're good. She nodded, nervously fidgeting with her napkin, unable to meet my eyes. Finally, she took a deep breath. I need to apologize to you, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. For all the years that I didn't see you. Truly see you. I felt my chest tighten, a wall of old hurt threatening to rise up. Mom, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Let me talk, she insisted, finally looking me straight in the eye. Her own eyes were swimming with tears. I always knew Brenda was difficult. But I thought if I just gave her more attention, if I protected her more, if I smoothed things over for her, she would eventually change. And in the process, I neglected you. I just assumed you were fine. I left you to deal with the consequences of her problems, all alone. Tears began to stream down my face, hot and silent. It was everything I had felt my entire life, finally being said out loud. After you confronted us that day, she continued, her voice breaking, I started really thinking. I started putting the pieces together. The friends Brenda lost, like Judith. The boyfriends who always disappeared. the stories that never quite added up. I realized that I always chose to believe her version of every story. Why? I asked, my voice choked. Why her? Because she cried louder, my mother admitted, the confession a painful whisper. Because you always seemed so strong, so capable, so self-sufficient. And I made the terrible mistake of confusing your strength with not needing my support. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the unspoken grief of years hanging between us. How is she? I asked quietly. She moved to another state. She's in therapy. She told me she needs to start over, away from everyone. My mother hesitated, then added, she asked me to tell you, that she knows she was wrong. But that she can't bring herself to apologize to you yet. And I can't bring myself to forgive her yet, I replied honestly. Maybe someday. But not now. I understand, she said, reaching her hand across the table. Her hand was trembling. Can I? Melissa, can I please try to be a better mother to you now? I looked at her, at the genuine remorse in her eyes, and I took her hand. We can try to be a better family, I said. But it's going to take time. She smiled through her tears, a watery, hopeful smile. I have time, she whispered. A few weeks later, my father showed up at my house. He came without warning on a Saturday morning, holding a slightly crushed bouquet of flowers from the grocery store and wearing the awkward expression of someone who was completely out of their element. Can I come in? He asked, his voice timid. Of course, Dad. Walter was in the kitchen making coffee. He greeted my father politely, shook his hand firmly, and then tactfully made himself scarce, giving us space to talk. I like him, my father said, getting straight to the point. He seems like a good man. He is, I said, a small smile on my face. I came here because, well, your mother said you two talked. And I realized I never apologized to you. My father was never a man of many words, so this was monumental. He sat awkwardly on the edge of the sofa. I always knew Brenda was problematic, he continued, staring at his hands. But I thought it wasn't my problem. I thought it was women's business, that your mother would solve it. I just stayed out of it. But in the end, you both suffered. And you, especially. Dad, I started, but he held up a hand. No, daughter, let me finish, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I failed as a father. I failed to protect you. I failed to properly educate her. And I failed to teach you both that sisters should support each other, not destroy each other. I felt a familiar lump form in my throat. Your mother told me everything. About Dennis, about what Brenda did to you. He shook his head, a look of deep shame on his face. If it were me, I don't think I could ever forgive. But you found a way to transform all that pain into something good. And I am so proud of that. Melissa, I am so proud of you. They were the words I had waited my whole life to hear. Tears streamed down my face as I went to him and hugged him, burying my face in his shoulder. Thank you, Dad, I whispered. He held me tight. Do you think there's still time for me to be a better father? I pulled back and smiled through my tears. There's always time. That night, I told Walter everything. The conversations with my mother and my father. He listened in silence, just holding my hand, giving me the space to process it all. How do you feel? He asked when I finished. I thought for a moment, and the answer surprised me. Free, I replied. For the first time in my life, I feel truly free. And about Brenda? I took a deep breath. I hope she finds her peace, somewhere far away from me. But I do hope she finds it. He smiled and kissed my forehead. You're incredible, you know that. We're incredible, I corrected him. And it was true. Because in the end, this journey was never just about beating Brenda or getting revenge. It was about learning that I deserved to be loved properly, to be defended, to be respected. It was about discovering that family isn't just about who you share blood with, but about who chooses to stand by your side and fight for you. It was about realizing that sometimes, to find the love of your life, you first need to stop accepting the crumbs of affection from people who have never truly valued you. A year has passed since that last conversation with my father. Life is quiet now. It's a beautiful, peaceful quiet. Walter and I moved in together 6 months ago. We found a small house with a big backyard for his dog. My parents come over for dinner once a month, and it's nice. It's not perfect. There are still decades of learned behaviors to undo, but we're trying. We're building something new. And today, when I wake up next to Walter, with the sun streaming through the window and the dog snoring at our feet, I know that every single battle, every tear, every moment of rage, was worth it. Because it all brought me here. To him. To us. To a peace I never thought was possible. That's my story. If you've ever felt overlooked, betrayed, or had to fight to reclaim your own happiness, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Your stories and your strength mean the world to me. Thank you so much for listening.